Like mosaic knitting, mosaic crochet is a way to incorporate color into the finished fabric without having to change colors midway through a row or strand colors as you work across a row. In this video, I'll take you along as I try mosaic crochet for the very first time. I'll talk about what I like about it and what I found a little bit challenging. There are two types of mosaic crochet: interlocking mosaic crochet and overlay mosaic crochet. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through my process of learning the ins and outs of overlay crochet. So overlay crochet gets its name from the fact that in the finished fabric, one set of stitches is laid over top of another. It achieves this effect in actually a very simple way. So there are only two types of stitches that you use in overlay crochet. You use single crochet stitches. In UK terms, those are known as double crochet, and you use double crochet, and again, in UK terms, that's what's known as treble crochet. You only use one color per row, and at the end of each row, you snip off the color and go back to the beginning and start the next row in the next color. So you're only ever working on the right side of the fabric, and you're only ever using one color at a time. Single crochets are always worked only through the back loop. So although when you normally crochet, you crochet through both loops at the top of the stitch, for the single crochet stitches that you use in mosaic knitting, you're only ever working through that back loop. When you work double crochets in mosaic crochet, those are always worked in the front loop of the row below the row that you're currently on. So you simply have to kind of remember that, right? Double crochets will always be worked in the front loop of the row below. Single crochets will always be worked in the back loop only. And this is how you create that overlay, right? Because the double crochets are the stitches that are going to overlay more than one row, and they're going to be attached to that front loop on the row below. The main challenge when it comes to learning and working mosaic crochet, as it is with so many other things in the fiber arts, is reading the chart. The structure of charts for mosaic crochet are actually pretty straightforward. So you have the row number all the way on the right, and then next to that, and on this image that I'm putting up on the screen here, that you have A and B. So you have a color A and a color B. And the color of that square and the letter that's associated with that color tells you what color that row is to be worked. So for example, on row 30, I am working the entire row in color A. And row 31, that entire row is worked in color B. The BS indication is the indication for the border stitch, so that each side of the horizontal length of your project is going to have a border stitch. The tricky part, or the potentially challenging part, comes from reading the stitch chart. And when you first start working with it, it can be a little bit confusing, right? I had a little bit of trouble getting my brain around it because the squares are different colored, but you are always working the row in a single color, right? So if we take and look at row 29 here, it looks like that first stitch after the border stitch is going to be worked in color A, but it's not. The whole row is going to be worked in color B because that's what's indicated at the start of the row. So if the whole row is going to be worked in color B, you may wonder, why are some of the squares on the chart clearly in color A. And this gets to how to read the specific squares. So on this chart, you always, if the square has an X in it, that indicates that it's a double crochet. And if you remember our rule, double crochets are overlay stitches that are always worked into the stitch in the row below in the front loop. Empty squares, squares without an X, those indicate single crochets. So if we look at row 29, I'm going to be working it in color B, and the first two squares are going to be single crochets in the back loop and in color B. So why is that first stitch indicating a color A? It's because when you get to row 30, which is worked in color A, you see that first stitch is an X. That's a double crochet. That is going to be worked in the front loop of the row below. So when you look at the chart, right, what the chart is indicating is that first stitch of row 29 is in color A because there's going to be that overlay stitch that comes down over it, so that will make it color A. And similarly, you see the same thing happening between row 30 and 31, right? That second stitch on row 31 is a double crochet, and that's because it's going to be worked into the front loop of the second stitch of row 30, the preceding row. And so when you look at row 30, it says color A, and that's worked all the way across in color A, but there's an overlay stitch that's going to make it look like it's color B. I think this becomes a little bit clearer when you look at an actual project. So you can take a look at a portion of the project that I'm working here, and you'll see what I'm talking about, right? That basically the chart is showing you what the finished fabric is going to look like once it's incorporated all of those overlaid stitches. So you have to really kind of shut your brain off and just say, okay, if I'm on row 30, it's worked in the first color, that white color, and I'm simply going to pay attention to where I need to work double crochets and where I need to work single crochets. They're all going to be worked in color A, and then I will, kind of the next row work color B. The other challenge that comes with mosaic crochet is that you have to make sure when you're working a double crochet into the row below that you're skipping the stitch on that current row. Right? So you make sure, so each stitch has a stitch that it's worked into. It's just the X's, the double crochets, are worked into the row below. So that means there should be an empty stitch behind them on the row. This can get a little bit challenging, especially at first. I found it particularly challenging when you're working the very first row or two of a pattern because the pattern hasn't really been established yet. And so, full disclosure, I ended up having to rip out a couple of the initial rows, but the flip side is the good part about that is you're working one row at a time, you're only working one color, and so if you get looking at the row and realize that your count is off somehow, it's very easy to pull back and figure out where you went wrong. And if you can't do that, then worst case scenario, you can kind of redo the entire row. And so I had to do that a couple of times. I found that once the pattern gets established and you get used to that idea, again, single crochet worked in the back loop, double crochet worked in the front loop of the row below, X's always indicate those double crochets. Once your brain kind of adjusts to that, it actually goes pretty quickly, and especially when you can see the pattern kind of shaping up. Okay, so that was my experience learning overlay Mosaic Crochet. I hope you found this interesting and useful. So I hope you'll consider subscribing and sticking around and coming back. Till then, have a great week. Thank you so much for watching.